Welcome back to Pleasure in the Pause, a podcast dedicated to empowering midlife women to connect with their body's pleasure and power through perimenopause, menopause, and beyond. I am your host, Gabriella Espinosa, women's health coach, menopause advocate, and pleasure visionary. Each week, I sit down with women's health experts, thought leaders, and storytellers for bold, thought-provoking conversations that educate, inspire, and challenge the myths we've been taught about our bodies, aging, and sexuality. I also share solo episodes with evidence-based insights, real talk, and embodied tools to support you in thriving through midlife with clarity, confidence, and vitality. Because your pleasure matters in and out of the bedroom. So take a deep breath, settle into your body, and let's begin. Welcome, beautiful listeners. Thank you so much for being here. Whether this is your first episode or you've been listening all year, I am so grateful to have you in this space. Today's episode is a celebration, a best of 2025, highlighting the conversations that truly resonated with you this year. These are the episodes you downloaded, shared, sent to your friends, and watched on YouTube. They reflect what was top of mind for so many of you, from hormone therapy to testosterone, from pleasure to power to deep satisfaction. These are the things women in midlife are deeply craving and absolutely deserve to know. You'll hear clips from 6 standout episodes, just a taste. And if something speaks to you, I've linked the full episodes in the show notes so you can go back and explore them in more depth. So here's what you'll find inside. A powerful deep dive with Dr. Jila Senemar, where we unraveled why so many women aren't feeling better on hormone therapy and how to truly optimize it. A bold conversation with Dr. Susan Hardwick-Smith about the truth and politics behind testosterone for women and what we deserve to know. My solo breakdown of the FDA hearing on vaginal estrogen, a historic moment for women's health and a powerful signal that things have changed. A candid, eye-opening chat with Dr. Laurie Mintz, author of Becoming Cliterate, on redefining sexual satisfaction and why midlife might be your hottest chapter yet. Our beautiful conversation with my friend Lauren Elise Rogers, sparked by the film Baby Girl starring Nicole Kidman, where we explored the depths of fantasy, desire, and reclaiming our power through sexuality. And finally, one of my favorite solo episodes of the year, where I shared my top 5 pleasure principles. These are the simple, profound truths every midlife woman should know to feel more turned on in her life. No lingerie required. These clips are just a glimpse, but together they tell a powerful story that 2025 was a year of curiosity, clarity, and deeper reclamation. So I hope you enjoyed this best of episode as much as I loved creating it. And if it resonates, please forward it to a friend. It's a beautiful way to introduce someone to what pleasure in the pause is all about. As always, I'd love to hear what lands with you. You can email me at hello@gabriellaespinosa.com or tag me on Instagram. I always love reading your messages and seeing how you're integrating this work into your life. Thank you again for being part of this community. I hope 2025 was full of moments of pleasure, knowledge, and connection, and may 2026 bring even more. Enjoy the show. What are the main pillars of hormone therapy that you're explaining to the woman that she can potentially start?
So what I start with is we review their symptom questionnaire that I have them fill out. And I actually really ask them, what are the top 3 things that are your priority right now to address? Like if you had 3 things to fix right away, what are those? And then we base it based on that. And a lot of times it's, not sleeping well, fatigue, no energy, and the moodiness. I think those are the big ones that into the doctor's office where they're like, okay, I'm losing it. My friends are telling me I'm not being myself. My husband's upset with me. They catch themselves yelling at their young children and they're like, this is not me. And I don't want to be that mother. So it's those things that I take into account. And then we talk about the hormones that are going chaotic in their system right now. It's the estrogen, it's the progesterone, and it's the testosterone. I tell them, these are the big three that are playing a role in your perimenopause, menopausal symptoms. And it's really each one does something different. So the estrogen, and I tell them there's the synthetics and the bioidentical. So estrogen, when we're talking estrogen, we're talking estradiol because that is the bioidentical, what your body naturally makes and what it recognizes. And that's what we want to replace. That's really the key element. Come along with that is a progesterone component. So those are the two big ones that I really start off with, depending again on each woman. Like there are those who are just, they're there, they understand what's happening, they want to address it, but they're not ready for everything. And then I have other women who want to come in and they're like, I want it all now. So from A to Z, and they want to go with it. And I'm okay. I will do either. I know my patients and I have an open discussion with them. So the estradiol is one component. The progesterone, I explain it to them as this is what's going to help you sleep. This is what's going to calm down your brain. It's kind of like the chill pill of hormones. It calms everything down. You're able to shut off the running list that you're making in your mind at night when you're trying to sleep at 2, 3 a.m. And then it also helps with people who develop anxiety out of nowhere. They're like, I've never had anxiety in my life, and now I'm anxious over everything. So those are the two that I discuss. And then the testosterone component, I bring it around. And I do explain that I'm more on the conservative side. So everything is more topical than injectable. I know about pellets. I use pellets on certain patients who've come to me on them, given elsewhere, and they don't know how to manage them. So if I were to continue that woman on a pellet therapy, then I would go down that path with her, but I would really be watching her numbers closely and keeping her within the physiologic range of that testosterone. That way we don't end up having the irreversible side effects that can happen with too much testosterone. But most women, I will do topical testosterone. So, transdermals like either the cream or the androgel. And I would explain to her what it's for. It's really energy, it's libido, it's muscle mass, it's brain cognition, the brain fog that they have. So we go through all of it and I explain to them what to expect. Okay. With the estradiol, whichever version they use, the patch or the pill or the mist, I try and stay away from the pill just because if they have any kind of background history of blood clot disorders or anything like that, then we're better off staying with the transdermals. And I explain that to them because I have a story of a woman who struggled for years, saw multiple doctors, and she's a very well-educated woman in the healthcare field herself. And because of a history of a blood clot at one point that was, just kind of happened after an accident, nobody would give her hormone therapy, no form of it. And she was struggling. Like she was just not herself. She didn't feel well. She kept going around and would bring the studies to doctors and they would still dismiss her. It's not safe. You can't be on it. She came to me for a second opinion. I went through all of her paperwork. She had seen her hematologist, cleared. She does not have an underlying disorder for coagulation. She just had one episode, never happened again. I said, you're a candidate. She said, you're the first person ever to say that to me. I said, you're definitely a candidate. I'm not going to give you oral estradiol, but I can give you transdermal and we're going to see how you do on it. We're 6 months in and basically her life has turned around. A new person. She's like, I don't know what to tell these other docs. I said, honestly, it's in the data. It's there. Everybody knows this. This is not news. This has been there. We have the data behind this. Just stay away from the oral. You can do transdermal. You are not somebody with an issue. So going forward, these are all the discussions that need to be had for a woman to walk out with that prescription and feel confident enough and safe enough to use it. Because you and I both know they're going to go out there and they're going to start using it. And then they're going to go to lunch with their friends and have a discussion, right? And they're going to be like, you look better and you look good and you're not cranky so much anymore. What are you doing differently? And she's going to tell them, I'm on hormone therapy. And turn around and scare her because of the lack of knowledge and the fear that's out there from the WHI study in 2002 and say, oh my goodness, you're going to get this and you're going to get that. And are you sure you know what you're doing? And so that is where knowledge is powered. That is where I feel I'm educating my patients enough to actually turn that conversation around and say, actually, that's not true.
Testosterone is not a male hormone. It's a hormone that both men and women have. In fact, the fact that you might hear quite frequently talked about now is we actually make more testosterone throughout our lives as women than estradiol, which is an amazing fact. Now, we make 10 times less than men, but we still make an enormous amount. The reason why that's often misunderstood is because the measurement units are different. If you look at a piece of paper, the numbers look different. And if you look closely, the measurement units are different. You actually have to multiply testosterone by 10 to make it equal estradiol if you're looking at your labs. So that's just something that we were not taught. And so it's so fascinating. But men and women have testosterone. It's highest at around 25 to 30 years old, and then it slowly declines. And that happens for men. Of course, we all know about that, right? There's low testosterone clinics everywhere, and that's very well understood and accepted. But the same exact thing happens for women. And guys, I support them doing this. They'll complain about libido dropping, getting fat around the middle, losing energy, maybe some erectile dysfunction, losing muscle mass, just not feeling great. And off they go and they get their testosterone checked and it's low and it's replaced. And they have upwards of 20 FDA-approved testosterone products that are available for them to help them with this really important issue with midlife and beyond. Well, women have exactly the same thing, and our list of complaints are exactly the same, and we have exactly 0 FDA-approved products to help us with that. But luckily, we can get testosterone very safely replaced now in the amount that's appropriate for females. We don't want acne, oily skin, any of those things. I take it. I don't have any of those things. So testosterone is a really interesting hormone, and it has so many benefits for men and also for women. We've had it our whole lives. So if we're thinking about replacing our hormones, we don't want to forget about that one. Yes, estradiol is super important. No doubt the most important for our reduction of chronic disease and multiple other things. Progesterone, very important. But testosterone, let's not forget about it. It's been there all of our lives. So all three are really important. So there have been many actually now randomized controlled trials done on testosterone versus placebo for women at the appropriate dose for women. And all of them have been focused on one thing, which is what we call hypoactive sexual desire disorder, or low libido is what we call it, right? And so undoubtedly it helps with that particular symptom. Testosterone, does it help everybody? No. And we'll talk about that because libido is so complex, right? It's not just one thing. But in every study that's ever been done, it shows an improvement in sex drive compared to the placebo. And so that's really important information. So dramatically improved sex drive for many women, not all, but many. And then whenever studies are done, there's the primary focus, and then there's these other things that kind of is secondarily looked at. Also improves bone loss, so it reduces osteoporosis in long term, just like estrogen does, so improves our bone health, and also improves muscle conservation. And those are really important things that we all know so much about now, that how important it is to resistance train, eat protein. And testosterone's one of the things that can help us to maintain and build muscle, not if we sit on the couch, but along with exercise and nutrition. I'll tell you one more thing that nobody studied, not in a randomized controlled trial anyway, but we certainly studied it anecdotally in our patients and through surveys. These cognitive changes with testosterone that patients describe as things like optimism, energy, general sense of well-being, motivation. I hear those words all the time, and I experience that just to get up and go feeling. And I personally feel when I have more sex drive, I have more life drive. I'm more likely to go out to lunch with you or play pickleball or go on a trip or try a new thing, learn a new activity. That kind of blah feeling where you don't want to engage in sex, you want to just do nothing and just socially withdraw. So that's a really interesting thing. And then the next, decade or two, we'll see more studies looking into the cognitive effects of testosterone for women, but certainly they're beneficial. Absolutely.
The fact that the FDA convened this expert panel signals that menopause has finally reached the highest levels of medical and governmental recognition. This isn't just a women's issue anymore. It's being treated as a significant public health matter it always should have been. As a board member of the national nonprofit Let's Talk Menopause, I'm proud of our efforts to spearhead the grassroots campaign to remove the black box warning from vaginal estrogen. Our advocacy helped make this hearing possible. Leading today's historic hearing was Dr. Marty Makary, the new head of the FDA, who has made women's health one of his top priorities in his first 100 days in office. And regardless of your political affiliations, I was deeply heartened to see that the FDA under the current administration is seriously examining these issues that affect half the population. Dr. Makary shared his own personal story about his mother, who was denied hormone therapy during the height of the fear around 2002 and subsequently suffered bone fractures that may have been entirely preventable. He emphasized that bone fractures in older women can be fatal. It's not just about quality of life, it's about survival. He also emphasized that 50 plus million women over the last 20 years haven't been offered hormone therapy. They haven't even been asked about it by their doctors because of lingering medical dogma that prioritized fear over facts. His commitment to challenging deeply held assumptions and separating dogma from evidence gives me tremendous hope that we're finally going to see policy changes that reflect current science rather than outdated fears. Now, let me walk you through some of the most significant revelations from today's expert panel, because every woman needs to understand what's been hidden from us. Dr. Heather Hirsch, a board-certified internist, opened the historic FDA hearing with powerful words that set the tone for everything that followed. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. She immediately declared that we are harming women by not having clear facts, sharing the devastating story of her patient, Denise, who woke up in perimenopause with such severe symptoms she told her husband she was having thoughts of self-harm. Dr. Hirsch used her opening moments to systematically dismantle decades of medical dogma, boldly stating that vaginal estrogen is categorically safe for all women, period, and that the FDA's black box warning is simply wrong and should be removed. Her message was crystal clear. 50 million American women between ages 40 and 60 deserve policies based on current evidence, not outdated myths and the medical establishment's fear-based approach to hormone therapy, because that is doing more harm than the treatments themselves. Dr. James Simon, a menopause and hormone therapy expert, delivered perhaps the most damning evidence against current labeling practices. He demonstrated that low-dose vaginal estrogen, the kind used to treat vaginal dryness and recurrent UTIs, cannot be detected in the bloodstream. The logical disconnect is staggering. How can the FDA place its strongest possible warning on a treatment that doesn't even travel through your body systemically? How can something that can't be measured in your blood cause heart attacks, strokes, breast cancer, and dementia? Sexual medicine expert, urologist, and former guest on Pleasure in the Pause, Dr. Rachel Rubin, delivered one of the most emotionally charged and personal testimonies, revealing how the FDA's own labeling nearly killed her mother. As one of the few fellowship-trained sexual medicine urologists in the country, Dr. Rubin has spent 7 years advocating for the magic of local vaginal hormones, which she boldly declared are not only similar to, but actually way better than Viagra, because they treat sexual dysfunction while preventing over 50% of urinary tract infections. But her fight became deeply personal when her immunocompromised mother lay in a coma in the ICU for 6 months. The medical team refused to continue her dose of vaginal estrogen, justifying their refusal by citing the black box warning about strokes and heart attacks, despite Dr. Rubin's expertise in showing them the data. She had to roll up her sleeves, educate the entire medical team, fight the pharmacy's computer alerts, and teach the nurses how to administer a treatment they'd never heard of, all while her family feared losing their loved one to preventable urosepsis. Dr. Rubin emphasized the staggering economic impact. UTIs cost $7 million in hospital visits annually and make up 25% of infections in older adults. Yet, if Medicare patients use the $13 tube of vaginal estrogen, we could save our government billions of dollars per year. Standing before FDA leadership, she made a simple but devastating point. There is not a single study in the literature that says local vaginal estrogen causes stroke, blood clots, heart attacks, breast cancer, or probable dementia. Yet the FDA's label claims exactly that, forcing families like hers to fight for treatments that could save lives. Her presentation was both heartbreaking and eye-opening. How can we begin to close that gap and reclaim our sexual pleasure for ourselves?
For the vast majority of women, it is about external stimulation and considering that as essential as penetration. If you look at movies, porn, if women orgasm at all, they orgasm from penetration. I've had so many women say, "What's wrong with me? Why can't I do that? I'm broken." When in fact, the research is so clear, depending how the study is worded, only 4 to 18% of women orgasm from penetration alone. The rest need external stimulation, either alone or coupled with penetration. Here's a statistic that I think says it all. When women masturbate, less than 2% do so by putting something in their vagina. Less than 2%. The rest use external stimulation, either alone or coupled with penetration, and mostly alone. And yet, when what we're fed is these images of fast and fabulous orgasms from penetration alone. And that is not going to bring most women orgasm. And in fact, for many women, it's painful. Why? It could be due to menopause, or in younger women are having pain at alarming rates. Why? Because they have penetration before they're even aroused, or don't use lube, or both. So to have pleasure, we need to, it's this most essential but underutilized advice. Get the same type of stimulation with a partner as you do alone. This is not women's bodies. Women know their bodies when alone. It's just when a man enters the equation, they say, oh, maybe, I can do it a different way.
And so how can we start shifting our perspective and incorporate more clitoral stimulation into our sexual experiences? How and where do we start?
Well, first, it starts with the attitude, knowing you deserve sexual pleasure, and being able to turn off your self-monitoring during a sexual encounter. Is he having fun? Is this taking too long, right? Then it starts with self-pleasure. Pleasure yourself. Use lube. Use a vibrator. Focus on the outside. Bring yourself to orgasm. Get comfortable with that. And then it's communication with a partner, explaining to a partner outside the bedroom that you need that you want that. And I can give scripts even for doing that. Then really changing this script of foreplay. I hate these words. If we examine them, right? Foreplay, what comes before? Just to get her ready for intercourse, making that a prelude to the main event. Intercourse, which we call sex in our culture, as if that is the only and main act during which a woman is supposed to orgasm. We have to change that, the language and the way we do it. No more foreplay. That's the main play, as much as penetration is, considering that as much the main act. And switching out the scripts. No more trying to come at the same time. She Comes First. That's a great book by Ian Kerner about orgasming through oral sex, but it can be different. It can be vibrator stimulation, hands. Take turns. We know lesbian women have more orgasms, and it's because they take turns receiving and giving pleasure rather than both expecting to orgasm at the same act. And also, really important, I want every woman listening to hear this. It is no less sex if you touch yourself. You can use a vibrator on yourself while your partner caresses your breasts. You can use a vibrator on yourself while you're giving oral sex. You can use a vibrator on yourself during intercourse. You can use one after. You know what you feel. And the whole act, it just privileges male sexuality if it revolves around the penis. So it's completely legitimate, just as much sex to touch yourself and have your partner be part of the action.
From your perspective, why are fantasies such an important part of our sexuality, and how can we use them as a tool for our sexual empowerment?
You are speaking my language. This is one of my favorite things. I literally just concluded a session with a client where we were talking about the power of the erotic mind and the important role it plays. What I think is often not discussed is a thing Esther Perel became really well known for saying is that often our red light district or erotic minds are filled with things that we would sometimes demonstrate against during the day. So Dr. Jack Moran, one of my favorite authors on the erotic mind, talks often about these 4 cornerstones of eroticism. And so if your audience is not familiar with eroticism in general, I think that these themes really help us discuss fantasy. So Jack talks about, number 1, the cornerstone of longing and anticipation, that thing that's just out of reach because there is so much excitement in the energy of moving towards something, of wanting something, of anticipating. So that's cornerstone 1, longing and anticipation. Number 2, violating prohibitions, that little element of taboo of the naughtiness factor, incredibly hot and erotic. Number 3, this search for power, which we definitely see in this film so much. This could be power over or power under. Any of these dynamics can be incredibly erotic to the mind. And then number 4, overcoming ambivalence, which is my personal favorite, which is that thing that we have to work to earn, that working for, which can really get our erotic engines running. What I think is so important to discuss in fantasy is that they can absolutely be a pathway to turn on, to arousal, to desire, and yet they can also be a recipe for a very unhealthy relationship. So I find in my work that many of my clients have chosen a good partner, a healthy partner, a partner who is not ambivalent towards them, a partner who does not exert power over them or try to control them. And they come to me and they say, Lauren, I married the good one, and now my sex is boring. What do I do? And this is where I think that the erotic mind is the perfect playground. That when women in particular can give themselves permission to play in this erotic space, whether solo or partnered, whether they are enjoying this fantasy in their own time or sharing it with a partner, it can literally be the springboard into this magical world. I say all the time that I love using the analogy of a springboard for erotic fantasy, because oftentimes in athletics, we'll see a gymnast use a springboard onto like a balance beam. In our minds, we don't think less of the gymnast for using a springboard, but to have a pathway that gives us a greater access to our sexual expression, oh my goodness, so wonderful. But where I like to caution clients is when we push our eroticism into the shadows, as our main character did for years and years, it is in the shadows that they take on often the thing that we most fear. By integrating our erotic minds into our lives, it is then that we can see it literally nurture the things around us. But if we do as our heroine in this movie did and smush our eroticism into the shadows, it will oftentimes take on the thing that we most fear. And I think it is critically important to be able to differentiate between fantasy and reality. And that can be such a fun conversation.
Last but not least, pleasure principle number 5, my favorite one, how to feel fully turned on. A turned on life isn't about sexy lingerie or peak orgasmic experiences, although those are very nice to have. But it's also about living in alignment with our desires, our lived experience, our wisdom, and our bodies. and acknowledging that midlife doesn't mean the end to your pleasure, to your sexuality, or your desires. It's the chapter in our lives where we get to define and own these parts of ourselves. It's about living in alignment, feeling lit up from within, saying yes to what fuels your joy, your vitality, your creativity, and your truth. You are not here to perform. You are here to feel alive in this one precious life. This could look like saying no to things that drain your energy, starting a new hobby or picking up one after 20 years, walking barefoot on the grass, lingering at the sight of the sun setting, touching your own body with reverence and curiosity. One of my clients, Elena, rediscovered her sensuality through art. She said, when I'm painting, it's like my whole body is saying yes to life again. It's sensual, it's alive, it's turned on, just not in the way I thought it would be. That, my friend, is the new definition of a turned on woman. She's awake to her own energy. She's in conversation with her body. She's not chasing, she's receiving. So let's recap these 5 pleasure principles for midlife. 1, pleasure is essential nutrition, your daily dose of vitamin P. 2, start with curiosity, not criticism. 3, practice pleasure snacks daily. 4, communicate with yourself and others. And 5, a turned on life is about alignment, not performance. This next season of your life and this next season of this podcast is an invitation to explore, to soften, to come home to yourself. Your pleasure is not optional. It is your birthright. Thank you for joining me for this episode of Pleasure in the Pause. Want to help me spread more pleasure in the world? Please hit subscribe to the podcast and share this episode with a friend, a sister, or any woman you care about. Because when we share these conversations, we remind each other we are not alone. Together, we create ripples of empowerment and support that reach far beyond ourselves. Your support means the world to me. Thank you. Remember, your pleasure matters. The information shared on this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only and is not intended as medical advice. Always consult your healthcare provider before making any decisions about your health or treatment. The views expressed by guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of the host or Pleasure in the Pause.